All right, let's get into this. It's an absolutely wild story about a guy who, let's be honest, failed at pretty much everything. And then, when most folks are thinking about retirement, he goes and starts a global empire. I mean, it's a journey that starts with total failure and ends with, well, you know, finger-licking good success.
Just let that sink in for a minute. 65. The whole Kentucky Fried Chicken story, the global giant we know today, it doesn't even really get started until its founder, Harland Sanders, is 65. After a whole lifetime of things just not working out, he's basically broke. All he had to his name was his Social Security check and, of course, that secret recipe.
So, how do we get to the empire? Well, you've got to understand the man first. We need to go back and look at the long, and difficult road Harland Sanders traveled before anyone ever called him the Colonel. You know, his life before chicken was just a whole string of failures, really. When his father died, he was just a kid, had to learn to cook for his siblings. By 13, he was out of the house, trying his hand at all sorts of jobs. Railroad worker, selling insurance, even a fireman. But nothing ever stuck. He just bounced around, never finding his footing. It wasn't until he hit 40 that he ended up at this little Shell gas station out in Corbin, Kentucky. And it's right there, at that gas station, that things finally started to click. He started cooking for travelers. We're talking steaks, country ham, good home-style food. And get this, he served them in a tiny storeroom on his own dining room table. People absolutely loved it. So much so that he eventually built a full-blown 140-seat restaurant and motel right there, the Sanders Court and Cafe. Okay, so this is where Sanders' obsession with doing things the right way leads to a real game changer. See, he loved his fried chicken, but he hated that it took 35 minutes to pan fry a single order. That's just too long for hungry travelers. So what does he do? He buys one of the very first commercial pressure cookers, tinkers with it, and basically invents a pressure fryer. It was pure genius. It slashed the cooking time way down, but kept all that juicy pan-fried quality. And right around then, in 1940, he perfected it all. His secret original recipe of 11 herbs and spices. All right, so he's finally found success, right? Well, just as he's hitting his stride, disaster strikes. And this is the moment, this is the turning point, where everything he's built is about to crumble, forcing him into a move that, against all odds, would make him a household name around the entire world.
Seriously, just imagine this. You spend a quarter of a century building up a business from nothing. It's your life's work. And then, boom, the government builds a new interstate and it bypasses you completely. All your customers, gone. Just overnight. That is exactly what happened to Harland Sanders. At 65 years old, he was forced to sell everything at a loss. He was basically bankrupt.
But here's the thing about the Colonel. He didn't give up. So what does the 65-year-old guy do? He gets in his car and starts driving all over the country. Now, he wasn't trying to sell his recipe, no way. He was offering to teach it to other restaurant owners. All he asked for in return was just 4 cents for every piece of chicken they sold. And the response? Rejection. Over and over again. We're talking more than 1,000 rejections. But that crazy persistence, it finally paid off. Big time. The whole idea just exploded. By 1963, think about it, just a handful of years after sleeping in his car and getting rejected, there were more than 600 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. It had become the biggest fast food operation in the entire U.S. at the time. And this is so key. It wasn't just Sanders. Those first franchisees were absolutely crucial. His very first partner, a guy named Pete Harmon, was a marketing whiz. Harmon is the one who came up with the name Kentucky Fried Chicken. He invented the iconic bucket meal for families to take home. And that legendary slogan, "It's finger-licking good?" Yeah, that was him too. So now there's a new problem. The company is growing at an insane pace. It's just getting too big for an aging Colonel Sanders to handle all by himself. And that leads him to make a decision he'd come to regret, and one that would spark a pretty bitter fight for the rest of his life. So in 1964, he sells the U.S. company for $2 million. The deal sounds pretty good on paper. He gets a lifetime salary, and most importantly, he gets to stay on as the face of the brand and its official quality controller. But this right here, this is what sets the stage for an epic battle. The Colonel versus the corporation. And man, did KFC go through some owners. It was like a revolving door. You had a liquor company, a tobacco company, and then PepsiCo. A lot of these guys knew nothing about the food business, and it led to this chaotic growth, where at least in the Colonel's eyes, the quality started to really go downhill. And let me tell you, the Colonel did not hold back. He became the company's #1 critic, very, very publicly. He famously trashed their new gravy, calling it wallpaper paste. He even sued one of the owners, Hubelin, for a whopping $122 million, saying they were misusing his image. He was their greatest asset and their absolute worst nightmare, all at the same time.
Okay, so as we head into the more modern era, the company and its founder are still butting heads. But at the same time, KFC's ambitions are getting bigger. The focus starts to shift from just America to, well, the entire planet. And this chart really shows you the seismic shift that happened. In 1987, KFC does something huge. It becomes the very first Western fast food chain to open in China. And that one move, it changed the game completely. Fast forward to today, and China is KFC's single biggest market. They have more restaurants there than they do back home in the US. So, how'd they do it? What's the secret sauce to that global success? Well, a huge part of it is changing the menu to fit local tastes. I mean, take a look at KFC in Indonesia. Yeah, you can get the original chicken, but you can also get rice, potato croquettes, things that are tailored specifically for the people there. It's smart.
But here's the catch. When you get that big, when you're a global machine, you also become incredibly fragile. And that brings us to our final section, the huge challenges that come with running a modern-day juggernaut like KFC. So, what happens when a chicken restaurant runs out of chicken? It sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But in 2018, in the UK, it actually happened. A total meltdown in their supply chain forced KFC to shut down more than 2/3 of all their restaurants in the country.
So what on earth happened? Well, it was a logistics nightmare. They had just switched to a new delivery partner. Their old system was spread out, with 6 different warehouses all over the UK. The new system, run by DHL, put everything in one place, a single giant warehouse. And what they created in technical terms is a single point of failure. It means if that one thing goes wrong, the whole system collapses. And that's exactly what happened. A traffic accident blocked the roads near that one warehouse, and just like that, the entire supply chain for the whole country was paralyzed. No trucks out, no chicken in.
And that whole mess taught us a really important lesson about business today. Your success isn't just about how good your product is. It's about how strong your entire supply chain is, that whole web of partners you rely on. The competition these days isn't just company versus company. It's supply chain versus supply chain. Which kind of brings us full circle, doesn't it? This whole story started with one man in one car with one secret recipe. Now it's this massive, incredibly complex global machine. And it really makes you wonder, right? Is a brand's greatest strength that enormous global scale? Also, at the end of the day, its greatest vulnerability?